Hello, class. So we are now in Chapter 11, Psychological Aspects of Young and Middle Adulthood. Learning Objective 1 is to describe Erikson's theories of psychological development during young and middle adulthood. So when it comes to intimacy versus isolation, Erikson's theorized that after young people develop a sense of identity, they next face the psychosocial crisis of intimacy versus isolation, which generally occurs in young adulthood about during their 20s. Intimacy is the capacity to experience an open, tender, supportive relationship with another person without fear of losing one's own identity. So, an intimate relationship permits the sharing of personal feelings as well as disclosures of ideas and plans that are not fully developed. There's respect for each other and mutual enrichment in the interactions. Intimacy involves being empathetic and able to give and receive pleasure within the relationship. Although intimacy is usually established within the context of a marital relationship, marriage itself does not produce intimacy. So many boys are taught to be restrained in expressing their feelings and personal thoughts. They are socialized to be competitive and self-reliant. And then traditionally, girls are socialized to be better prepared for emotional demands of intimacy. They may, however, enter an intimate relationship with inappropriate expectations based on traditional gender roles stereotypes. For example, they may expect that their partners to be stronger or more resourceful than what they are. The negative pole of crisis of young adulthood is isolation. So people who resist intimacy continually erect barriers between themselves and others. Isolation may also result from situational factors. A young person may be involved in studying to get into medical school, that he or she may not have time for an intimate relationship. Or a teenage girl may become pregnant, deliver, and start raising the child, that they may have fewer opportunities to become involved in any close relationships with an adult. So Erikson's 7th life stage development or developmental crisis is generativity versus stagnation. So generativity involves a concern with an interest in establishing and guiding the next generation. So the crisis of generativity versus stagnation is perceived by middle-aged adult to involve commitment to improve the life conditions of future generations. The achievement of generativity involves willingness to care about the people and things that one has produced. It also involves a commitment to protecting and enhancing conditions of one's society. It involves the adults members dedicating themselves to contributing their skills, resources, and creativity to improve the quality of life for the young. The opposite of generativity is stagnation. So stagnation indicates a lack of psychological movement or growth. Some adults are self-centered and seek to maximize their pleasures at the expense of others. Such people are stagnated because they have difficulty looking beyond their own needs or experiences. Burnout has also been identified as being one of the signs of stagnation. And different individuals manifest stagnation in different ways. Learning Objective 2 is to describe Peck's theory of psychological development during middle adulthood. So Peck asserted that there are 4 psychological advances that are critical to successful adjustment in middle adulthood. The first one is socializing versus sexualizing in human relationships. Peck suggests that it's psychologically healthy for middle-aged adults to redefine the men and women in their lives so that they can value them as individuals, friends, and companions rather than primarily as sex objects. The second one is valuing wisdom versus valuing physical powers. Peck views wisdom as a capacity to make wise choices in life. He suggests that well-adjusted middle-aged adults are aware that the wisdom that they now have is more than compensates for decreases in stamina, physical strength, or their youthful attractiveness. Emotional flexibility versus emotional impoverishment. Emotional flexibility is the capacity to shift emotional investments from one activity to another and from one person to another. So middle-aged adults are apt to experience breaking of relationships due to deaths of friends, parents, and other relatives, and the growing independence of children moving out of their home. Mental flexibility versus mental rigidity. By middle age, most people have completed their formal education and have been sufficiently trained for their jobs or careers. They have also arrived at a set of beliefs in about afterlife, religion, politics, entertainment, and so on. So some middle-aged adults stop seeking new information, and ideas become set in their ways and closed off to new ideas. Such people are apt to be timid in their intellectual growth and are apt to view life as mundane or unfulfilling and unrewarding. Learning objective 3 is to describe Levinson's theory of life structure, life eras, and transitions during adulthood. At the heart of Levinson's theory is the concept of life structure. The term is defined as the underlying pattern of design of a person's life at the given time. A person's life structure shapes and is shaped by the person's interaction with their environment. Levinson asserts that people shape their life structures during the following 4 overlapping eras. The first one is pre-adulthood. This is birth to about age 22. And this is the formative time from conception to the end of adolescence. Early adulthood from age 17 to age 45 is the era in which people make choices that significantly influence their lives and the era in which people display the greatest energy and experience the most stress. The next phase is the middle adulthood, age 40 to age 65, and it is the era in which people tend to have reduced biological capacities but increased social responsibilities. And finally, late adulthood, which is age 60 and beyond, and it's the final phase of life. So Levinson used, or his theory focused on the lifespan of men, and so early adulthood transition from 17 to 22. So during this transition, men move from pre-adulthood into adulthood. This is when a person moves out of their parents' home and becomes more financially independent. Then entry life structure for early adulthood, which is about ages 22 to 28. This phase has been called entering the adult world. During this phase, the young person becomes an adult and builds the entry life structure for early adulthood. Aspects of this phase often include involvement with their work, which may lead to a career choice, intimate relationships with others, or may lead to marriage or children. And then 2 important features of this phase are a dream and a mentor. So during this phase, men often have a dream of their future, which is usually viewed in terms of their careers. The vision of becoming a highly successful corporate president or a famous writer spurs them on and energizes their work activities. A mentor, on the other hand, is older, usually about 8 to 15 years older. The relationship with the mentor is a friendship with adult equality, but the mentor also performs the fatherly task of teaching, caring, criticizing, helping, and offering constructive suggestions in both career and personal matters. Age 30 transition, which is about 28 to 33. During this phase, the men take another look at their lives. They may review whether the commitment made during the previous decade were premature, or they may consider making strong commitment for the first time. Some men may move fairly effortlessly through this transition. Others experience crisis. Marriage conflicts may also occur during this time, and divorce is common. The next stage is accumulating life structure for early adulthood, which is about ages 33 to 40. This phase is ushered in by a period of settling down. The person makes a concerted effort to realize youthful dreams. During this phase, men make deeper commitment to family, work, and other important aspects of their lives. They may set specific goals for themselves during this time. The next phase is midlife transition, and this is usually during ages 40 to 45. This transition is focused on completing the work for early adulthood while learning the ropes of middle adulthood. During this period, men question nearly every aspect of their lives. Many men find this a time of moderate or severe crisis as well. The next phase is entry level entry life structure for middle adulthood, ages 45 to 50. During this transition, a man in his mid 40s begin a life structure that may involve new choices. So perhaps a new wife, or a different way of relating to his wife, or perhaps a new career of restructuring his present work. The next phase is age 50 transition, which usually occurs between 50 to 55. This transition is likely to be especially a difficult time for men whose midlife transition had been relative. Most men experience a moderate crisis at this time. The next phase is culminating life structure for middle adulthood. This is usually about ages 55 to 60. This phase is generally a stable transition in which men finish the framework of their life structure for middle adulthood. During this phase, those who are able to rejuvenate themselves, enrich their lives, and generally find that 50s time period was with great fulfillment. And then finally, the late adulthood transition, which is ages 60 to 65. This is a major transition turning point, as it is a time of ending middle age and preparing for later adulthood. Although this theory has been applied with men, generally with men, various researchers has also applied women to this theory as well. Learning objective 4 is to summarize Maslow's theory of hierarchy needs. So most of you are probably very familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Basically, he believed it was human nature for people to seek to know more about themselves and to strive to develop their capacities to the fullest. He viewed human nature as basically good and saw the striving for self-actualization as a positive process because it leads people to identify their abilities and to strive to develop themselves to feel good as they become themselves and to be beneficial to society. Yet he believed that very few people fully attain a state of self-actualization. Maslow identified the hierarchy of needs that motivate human behavior. According to Maslow, there are 5 different needs that individuals have. The first one is this physiological needs, which is including of water, food, oxygen, rest. And then the next need is safety needs, which includes security, stability, freedom from fear, anxiety, threat, and chaos. Belongingness and love is the next need, which involves intimacy and affection provided by your family or your friends or lovers. And then the next need would be self-esteem, which includes self-respect, respect of others, achievement, attention, and appreciation. And finally, self-actualization, which is the sense that one is fulfilling one's potential and is doing what one was suited or capable of. So basically, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, each level needs to be satisfied before an individual can think of the next level. So for instance, the first level that people would be concerned with would be the physiological needs. And if people don't have food or water, they're not going to be worried about their safety needs. Or if their safety needs are met, that means that their physiological needs are also being met. And so people go back and forth from one need to the next. So they may be going upward. So they may end up at self-esteem needs, but then something happens in their relationship and now they're not feeling like they belong or have any love in their life. And so they may fall back down from self-esteem to worrying about belonging and love needs. So basically, once clients' basic needs are met, then higher levels needs can be dealt with. So they're not thinking about the higher needs until the lower needs are met. Learning objective 5 is to describe emotional intelligence and social intelligence. So emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize and deal with one's own feelings as well as the feelings of others. Daniel Goleman popularized the emotional intelligence concept and expanded it to include such qualities as empathy, motivation, social competence, optimism, and conscientiousness. Social intelligence is made up of social awareness, including social cognition and empathy, and it's also includes social facility, which includes self-presentation, influence, concern. Some tests have been developed to measure social intelligence, like the IQ test. Social intelligence tests are usually based on a 100-point scale. And so most people score about 85 to 115. Scores of 140 are generally considered to be very high, and people with social intelligence scores below 80 may have an autism spectrum disorder. These people are apt to have trouble making friends and trouble with communication. They may need social skills training. People with social intelligence scores over 120 are considered to be very socially skilled and well adjusted. Social intelligence has also been defined in a variety of ways. So, social intelligence is the ability to understand and manage men and women, boys and girls, to act wisely in human relations. So, according to this definition, it's equivalent to interpersonal intelligence. A common contemporary definition of social intelligence is the capacity to effectively negotiate complex social relationships and environments. So, people with high social intelligence are considered socially skilled and generally work well in jobs that involve direct contact with communication with people. So people with low social intelligence are best suited for work in positions with low customer contact. Learning objective 6 is to describe nonverbal communication cues. So in seeking to assess human behavior, it's also important to attend to nonverbal communication cues. So it is impossible not to communicate. So no matter what we do, we transmit information about ourselves. Even an expressionless face communicates messages. At times, nonverbal cues such as sweating, stammering, blushing, and frowning convey information about feelings that we desire to hide. By developing a skill in reading nonverbal communication, we can be more aware of what people are feeling and better able to interact effectively. Nonverbal communication interacts with verbal communication. Nonverbal messages nonverbal messages may repeat what is said verbally. So a husband may say he's really looking forward to becoming a father and repeat this happy anticipation with glowing facial expression. So that's basically like his nonverbal messages are also displaying what his verbal message is saying. Nonverbal messages may substitute for verbal ones. So if a close friend has just failed an important exam, you can get a fairly good idea what he or she is thinking and feeling by looking at your friend's facial expression. Nonverbal messages may accent verbal messages. So if someone you are dating says he or she is angry and upset with something you did, the depth of feeling may be emphasized by pounding a fist or pointing an accusing finger. Nonverbal messages may serve to regulate verbal behavior. Looking away from someone who is talking to you is a way of sending messages that you are not interested in talking. Nonverbal messages may contradict verbal messages, and the nonverbal messages are often more accurate. So be aware that your nonverbal messages may be contradicting your verbal ones, and in the end, the nonverbal ones are generally more accurate and the ones that people take into consideration. So although nonverbal messages can be revealing, they can also be unintentionally misleading. So think of the times when people have misinterpreted your nonverbal messages. Has that ever happened? I bet that happens all the time. Nonverbal behavior is often difficult to interpret. So a frown, for example, may represent a variety of feelings: being tired or angry, feeling rejected, confused, unhappy, irritated, disgusted, bored, or simply being lost in thought. Nonverbal behavior, like I said, can be misinterpreted. So we have to be careful if we are displaying something that may be confusing to someone else. So nonverbal messages should not be interpreted as facts, but as clues that need to be checked verbally to determine what the sender is really thinking and feeling. So since nonverbal communication can be difficult to read or understand or interpret, then we need to make sure that we're checking with the other person to make sure that the verbal and nonverbal messages are matched. We tend to take relaxed postures in non-threatening situations and tighten up when we're under stress. Teachers and public speakers often watch their posture of listeners to gauge how the presentation is going. So if members in the audience are leaning forward in their chairs, it is usually a sign that the presentation is going well. If the audience is slumping in their chairs, it's a cue that it's not going so well. When it comes to body orientation, it is the extent to which we face toward or away from someone with our head, body, and feet. Facing directly towards someone signals an interest in starting and continuing a conversation. Facing away signals a desire to end or avoid that conversation. Most of us are aware that our facial expression conveys our feelings. So when we want to hide our true feelings, we concentrate on controlling our facial expressions. But we are less aware that our gestures are also revealing our feelings, and so we put less effort into controlling our gestures when we want to cover up our feelings. As a result, gestures are sometimes better indicators about how we really feel. People tend to fidget when they're nervous. They may bite their fingernails, tap their fingers, rub their eyes or other parts of their body, or tap a pencil. They may cross and uncross their legs. Many other gestures also provide cues to a person's thoughts and feelings, like clenching their fist. So, clenched fist and pointing fingers can be a signal of anger. When people want to express friendship or attraction, they tend to move closer. Hugs also represent a variety of feelings. So, it could be physical attraction, good to see you, best wishes. Shaking hands is usually a signal of a friendship or a way of saying hello or goodbye. Gestures are also used in relation to nonverbal messages for a variety of purposes. So, for repeating something, for substituting, for contradicting, and regulating. Some people literally speak with their hands, arms, and head movements. Many people are unaware that they do this. Spitz demonstrated that young children need direct contact or direct physical contact, such as being cuddled, held, or soothed. Adults also need physical contact. People need to know that they are loved, recognized, and appreciated. Touching through holding hands, hugging, and pats on the back are ways to communicate warmth and caring. Unfortunately, we have been socialized to refrain from touching except in sexual contacts. A hug can have a different meaning. So a hug at a funeral will connotate caring, while a hug when meeting someone connotates it's good to see you. Or a hug between parent and child usually means I love you, whereas a hug on a date may have sexual meanings. Touch is crucial for survival and development of children, and it's just as crucial for adults to assure that they are worthwhile and loved. So clothing is more than to just keep us warm or cover our bodies. Certain uniforms can tell us what a person does or who we can receive services from. Clothes also affect our self-image. If we feel we are dressed in a situation, we are apt to be more self-confident, assertive, and outgoing. If we feel that we're poorly dressed in a situation, we're apt to feel more reserved or feel less confident or less assertive. When it comes to personal space, each of us carries around our own invisible bubble, and only certain people that we are comfortable with are allowed to be in that bubble or close enough to that bubble. There's the different type of zones that would fit in that description. The intimate zone, which is about goes out to about 18 inches, where we have personal zone, which ranges about 18 inches to approximately 4 feet. Social zone ranges from about 4 feet to 12 feet. Then we have the public zone, which ranges from anything from 12 feet. So personal space, each one of us have our own personal space. We carry around our own invisible bubble. And this is what we consider our own private territory, and only people that we're comfortable with get to be in that bubble. Territoriality is behavior characterized by identification with an area in such way as to indicate ownership and defense of this territory against those who may invade it. It also exists in humans. There are even things we feel we own that we really do not own. Students tend to, in each class, select a certain seat to sit in, and if someone else sits in that seat, do you feel that your territory is being invaded? Facial expressions. For most people, the face and eyes are the primary sources of nonverbal communication. Facial expressions often mirror our thoughts and feelings. Um, the eyes are also great communicators. When we want to end or avoid a conversation, we look away from the other person's eyes. Um, the eyes also communicate dominance and submission. When a high status person and a low status person are looking at each other, the low status person tends to look away first. So the tone of our voice often has more influence than do the actual words spoken. The same words or phrase may have many different meanings. So, although it is common to hear people say that only inner beauty really counts, research shows that beauty plays an influential role in a broad range of interpersonal interactions. Male college students tend to give higher grades to females who are physically attractive than those who are less attractive. In one study, attractive females were more effective in modifying the attitudes of um, male students on national issues than were less attractive females. Attractive persons, regardless of their sex, are rated high on credibility, which greatly increases their ultimate persuasiveness in a variety of areas, including in sales, public speaking, and counseling. Conversely, unattractive defendants are more likely to be judged guilty in courtrooms and more likely to receive longer sentences. This is kind of sad, but research also shows that less attractive people are at a disadvantage from early childhood on. Teachers, for example, interact less and less positively with unattractive children. Physical attractiveness is also a crucial factor in determining who we decide to date and who we decide to marry. So, physical appearance plays a bigger role than we are willing to admit. The environment is also a form of nonverbal communication. The color of rooms apparently affects mood and productivity. The beautiful rooms appeared to stimulate alertness and creativity. Friendly words and smiles increased in the beautiful rooms. Irritability and hostility decreased. The most arousing colors are in order red, orange, yellow, violet, blue, and green. Pastel colors of pink, baby blue, and peach are thought to have a calming effect. Some prisons and jail administrators are now even thinking of painting cells in pastel colors, hoping that it will have a calming and relaxing effect on inmates. Dim lighting, comfortable seats, and subdued noise levels will also encourage customers to talk more and spend more time in a bar or restaurant. Casino owners in Las Vegas build their facilities without windows or clocks so that customers will be less aware of how long they have been gambling. This is with the aim to keep people gambling as long as possible. Learning Objective 7 is to summarize Glacier's choice theory of human behavior. Learning Objective 7 is to summarize Glacier's choice theory of human behavior. A major thrust of choice theory is that we carry around pictures in our heads, both of what reality is like and how we would like it to be. And by pictures, Glacier basically means that these are perceptions from our five senses. And in order to change a picture, we must replace it with one that will least reasonably satisfy the need in question. Glacier believes that we are driven by five basic innate needs. The first one is need of survival. This includes such vital functions as breathing, digesting food. The second is love and belonging. We generally meet the need through family, friends, pets. The third is need of power. According to Glacier, this need involves getting others to obey us and then receiving the esteem and recognition that accompany power. The fourth need is freedom. People want the freedom to choose how they live their lives, to express themselves, to read and write what they choose, to associate with whom they want, and to worship or not worship as they believe. And then the fifth need is fun. So Glacier believes learning is often fun. This gives us a great incentive to assimilate what we need to satisfy our needs. Choice theory also explains why and how we make the choices that determine the courses of our lives. It is an internal control psychology. And Glacier asserts that we choose everything we do. Following are the major axioms in choice theory. So The only behavior we control is the only behavior we can control is our own. No one can make us do anything that we don't want to do as long as we are willing to endure the consequences. The second axiom is all we give is to, or all we can give or get from the people is information. How we deal with that information is our choice or theirs. A teacher, for example, can assign readings to students, but he or she is not responsible for whether their students choose to read or not. The teacher, of course, can choose to give consequences to those students who fail to follow the reading instructions, such as giving them a lower grade. All we can do from birth to death is to behave. Glacier indicates that all behavior is total behavior and is made up of four inseparable components, which is acting, thinking, feeling, and physiology. And the last one is all long-lasting psychological problems are relationship problems. So relationship problems are also a partial cause of many other problems, such as fatigue, pain, weakness, and other diseases. Learning objective 8 is to describe Gawain's theory about intuition and how human behavior is affected by it. So an important step toward identifying and following your intuition is simply taking time, several times a day, to relax and listen to your gut feelings. The inner voice of intuition will present itself in a variety of ways, including images, feelings, and words. Your intuition can assist you in making such major decisions as whether to stay in college, choose a career, whether to end a romantic relationship, what kind of car to purchase, and what hobbies to pursue. Learning objective 9 is to understand the issue of substance abuse. Nearly everyone has one or more relatives or friends who are abusing alcohol or some other drugs. It is any habit-forming substance that directly affects the brain and the nervous system. It is a chemical substance that affects moods, perceptions, bodily functions, consciousness, and has the potential for misuse as it can be harmful for the user. Drug abuse is the regular or excessive use of drugs when, as defined by a group, the consequences endanger relationships with other people, are detrimental to the person's health, or jeopardizes society itself. The following section covers specific drugs as to what they are and what they do. They are depressants, stimulants, narcotics, hallucinogens, marijuana, tobacco, and anabolic steroids. I'm not going to go through each one of those and discuss those. Just please make sure whenever reading the chapter that you would go through each one of those specific drugs as to get a better understanding as to what they do. So habit-forming drugs can lead to dependence, which is a tendency of craving for repeated use or compulsive use. This dependence may be physical, psychological, or both. When physical dependence occurs, the user will usually experience bodily withdrawal symptoms when the drug is discontinued. Users generally develop a tolerance for some drugs, which means that they have to take increasing. Users also generally develop a tolerance for some drugs, which means they have to take increasing amounts over time. Drug companies widely advertise the benefits and effects of their products. Attitudes toward drug use also encourage abuse. For example, some college students believe that they should get stoned after a tough exam. People abuse drugs for a variety of reasons. Some people build up a tolerance to a drug and then increase the dosage to obtain a high. Abusers develop an intimate relationship with their drug of choice. They rationalize adverse consequences of drug abuse. They use projection to place blame for their problems on others. For example, if you had a wife like mine, you'd drink too. So there's a variety of theories have been offered as to why people use drugs. Biological theories assert that physiological changes produced by the drugs eventually generate an irresistible craving for the drug. Behavioral theories hold that people use drugs because they find them pleasurable and continue to use them because doing so prevents withdrawal distress. And then interactionist theories maintain that drug use is learned from interaction with others in their culture. For example, people drink alcohol because drinking is widely accepted. And this wraps up chapter 11. The next week we'll move on to chapter 12.